Greetings and welcome to Module 3. Let's start by doing a quick review of where we've been in the last two modules at the learning objectives for Module 1, the role and purpose of the profiler, understand the competencies and dimensions, recognize the links, use the website. In Module 2, we actually looked at some reports and hopefully you have a sense now of how to interpret a report. You feel that you have the tools to create or use an effective coaching report, and that you have a sense how to conduct an effective feedback session. So let's talk about where we're headed in Module 3 now. A longer list of objectives this time, but a lot of these are really the housekeeping things that we'll do to wrap up the course. You should end this session with the tools to conduct an effective development plan discussion. You should be able to recognize the attributes of a good development plan. You will know how to buy, distribute, and manage the questionnaires and produce reports using WorldWorks online system. We'll take a look at that in our live web conference. And you'll understand how to integrate the International Profiler into a range of interventions in your consultancy that will add value to your practice. You'll have the tools to create an effective marketing plan for the International Profiler in the context of your own business. And finally, you'll understand the next steps you must take to become a licensed WorldWorks mentor. Okay, let's talk now about the personal development plan. In reality, the goal of all of the activities we've discussed so far is to help your client arrive at a personal development plan to apply the insights that were gained through the International Profiler and the various stages of the feedback process. It's all well and good to have self-awareness, but what will your client do about that? And that is the question that the development plan answers. I will say at this stage that licensees vary quite a bit in how they approach the creation of the development plan and providing that feedback. So our goal in this module is not to give you a set formula, but to expose you to different ideas and approaches so that you can develop an approach that really works for you. So let's just talk about the development plan and what is it. Well, basically, it's a written document created in collaboration with a client that's designed to bring about change based on insights gained in the TIP feedback process. So the important concepts here are written, it's explicit, it's set down, it's done collaboratively, it's designed to bring about change, and of course it's all based in the work that led up to it throughout the questionnaire and feedback process. It's aimed specifically at improving readiness and effectiveness to work in international and cross-cultural settings. And one of the things I find with my clients is that often their behaviors vary quite a bit when they're in their comfortable surroundings than working in the more demanding environment of a cross-cultural setting. So we're really trying to get them to think about those settings and what adjustments need to be made and what strengths can be built on. A development plan includes specific, actionable steps, and this is an important piece of that you'll read about in the Module 3 materials, the ways to really ensure that the actions are concrete and measurable and time-bound. And another important thing is that a development plan can address areas of high and low emphasis. For my part, I am a strong believer that we should put just as much emphasis on a person's high areas, because it is often in building on our strengths that many of us go from good to great. It's important in the context of international work to think about the areas of low emphasis and where they may be impacting us, but I think it's also equally as important to help a client understand where their natural strengths and emphases lie and how they can use that productively. So that's a goal of the development plan process. Okay, let's just talk about the process that leads up to the creation of this development plan. As you can see on the screen before you, it begins when the client takes the TIP, the online questionnaire. We then move to feedback via the questionnaire report and a session with the coach. We hopefully end the session with several key areas of focus having been selected. These are the aha moments, and typically it's 3 or 4 competencies that the coach and the client decide merit further consideration. The next step is for the coach to provide additional information to the client to reflect further on these and what they might actually do in a development plan. This is typically material taken from the Development Resources Manual. And finally, the client and the coach generate a development plan that is meant to lead to change in international and cross-cultural settings. Let's talk about some possible approaches to this process. It's important to know that there really is no one set prescribed approach to the development plan process. This really varies a great deal by licensee, and it may even vary by client. Sometimes, for example, you may work with companies that want this to fit in with their traditional employee development schemes. So you can consider a variety of ways of going about the process and also the formats that you use. To help you with this, we've provided some sample templates and some plans for your use at the course website. If you go to the section of the course navigation bar called Course Resources, you'll find an area entitled Development Plan Documents, and there you'll find quite a few templates and actual plans to give you some ideas about how this can play out. In this next slide, we actually see one of the development plan templates that you'll find at the site. This was created by one of the World Work Principles, and you can see that in addition to the name of the candidate and the name of the coach, there's a place to describe the international context in which the person is working, some information about the high emphasis areas, and then in the box below, we note some key areas or competencies for development, the benefits of giving more emphasis to these competencies, and finally some possible actions to take that would help you develop this area. We've discovered that having people focus on the benefits will actually help clients develop the motivation that's needed to bring about sustained change. At our course website, you'll actually see this template carried out with an actual development plan, so you can have some concrete ideas of the kinds of things that a client might decide to focus on in their development work. WorldWork provides two really excellent resources to support you in this entire process. The first one is the feedback manual, and we use that in Module 1, and that is really the resource to guide you through the entire feedback process and working with the report and the initial feedback session. The second one is the Development Resources Manual, and here you'll find insights and suggested actions that you can suggest to your client regarding the development plan. This manual is available at the course website, and if you haven't printed it out yet and placed it in a binder, you'll want to do this as you start on Module 3 because we'll be making quite a bit of use of it during this session. So what does this Development Resource Manual contain? For each of the 22 dimensions of TIP, there are 4 major areas. One is the rationale, and that just helps the client understand why focusing on this area could really be important and what could be gained by doing that. You'll also find coaching questions, which are sample questions you might use in a feedback session to help someone reflect on that particular competency. A very useful aspect of this are the development plan suggestions. This is a collected list of possible actions that someone might have in their plan, and it was developed initially by the WorldWork personnel, but recently expanded considerably by a group of licensees. And finally, you'll find for each competency some training activities that can be used by an individual or group that are associated with a particular competency. So let's talk about how, as a coach, you might approach this process. If you look at the graphics on the left side of the screen here, these are repeats of pictures from an earlier slide, which really show where we end the first feedback session. At the end of the feedback session, we've noted several areas for focus and follow-up. Following that, there are several possibilities for action. Number 1, you can schedule another session to discuss the development plan. You can do that and/or send the client additional information about the selected areas of focus. And/or you can send them a template document for development planning. It's also possible to follow up the discussion via email, to arrive at an action plan through virtual communications. In my case, for example, after session 1, I send material that is based on the 3 to 4 competencies that we've selected, and I have drawn that from the Development Resources Manual, but also tailored it some for the particular client. I also send them a template, and then it's the work of the client to create a draft plan, which we discuss in a second session. The session is held typically 1 week after the first feedback session. And the end of that process is a finalized plan. At this point, I'd just like to remind you of the next steps in our course. You should read through the remaining materials in this Module 3 webpage. You should also, as you're doing that, use the resources that are referred to there in the section called Course Resources Development Plan Documents. And that will help you be aware of the many resources that are available to you. You should complete the activities in the discussion session at the Module 3 discussion area. That's the blog, as you've seen in the first 2 modules, and there'll be some particular activities for you to complete as we near the end of the course. Finally, you should be ready to participate in the live web conferencing session at the end of Module 3, per instructions that your instructor will have sent. You'll find some interesting activities coming up in this module. In the discussion area, for example, you'll be asked to identify some possible development plan actions for yourself based on your own profile. And in the live web conference, we'll discuss some development ideas for Lakshmi, who you met in our last web conference, so we can carry her story a little further through the development planning stage. We'll also discuss some marketing approaches for your practice, and you'll have a chance to hear the ideas of some of your classmates. Finally, you'll learn how to order the tools you'll need to conduct your practice client session, and you'll learn the steps to move through the practice client and end as a TIP licensee. Thanks very much for your attention, and I look forward to working with you in our final web conference.